Also been unhappy for a long time. Seriously unhappy in my marriage. And I just realized that I was hiding my light. I wasn't shining my light. I was working with this one lovely coach. Her name is Marty. And I said, how do you know? When is the right time? She says, you'll know. There will come a time when you just will know. And she was right. Namaste. How do you know when it's time to change course in your life or your business? We're going to be talking about that today. We're going to talk about this pivot point and how you can, I guess, prime yourself for recognizing it or just be, how to prime yourself for recognizing it. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. That's my plan, and that's what I'm sticking to it today. Oh goodness, yeah. Well, I tell you, this is an interesting thing. I want to share. I'll share a story from my life because it's been, at least for my personal life, and then we'll talk about the business side of it as well. For me, it's been a little stranger, shall we say? Um, but well, no, actually, okay. You know what? Yeah, I've got lots of examples. I'm realizing it today. I mean, I know I always come prepared with some notes about where I want to go today, but I'm just thinking now that yeah, how do you know when it's time to change course? Well, for me, in my personal life, I mean, one of the big changes that I made, a course correction, I guess, if you will, or definitely maybe not a course correction, but a definite pivot point for me came about when I knew was 4 years ago. 4 years ago? No, I guess even 5 years ago now. Yeah, it was. That's right. It was 5 years ago. It was 5 years ago, and it was January of 2021, as a matter of fact. Yeah, that's right. So it was 5 years ago. And something happened, and I'm not going to go into it, but there was just something was happening in the world, let's just say. And the way that my 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 significant other, my husband, reacted to what was going on shook me to the core. And I realized at that moment that our values just weren't in alignment anymore. I had put up with a lot of things, and of course he had, we've been married at that point, well over 30 years. And we each have our faults, nobody's perfect. And I put up with a lot from him, and he put up with a lot from me. But I'd also been unhappy for a long time. Seriously unhappy in my marriage. There were things about it, we got two kids, and of course, when they were younger, man, well, even I think probably when they were younger, I was fine. But it was like as the years go by, there are certain times and certain things that, I realized that I was putting up with a lot of stuff for a long time. And I also had realized that my husband shared a lot of the same characteristics of my mother. God rest her soul. Not necessarily the good characteristics. And what does it say? A lot of times girls marry their father. Well, I married my mother, frankly. And I should have known because their birthdays were one day apart. Just decades apart, but one day apart, the same month of the year. So the same astrological sign, and that was the clue right there. But when you're young, And you're in love, you overlook these things. And so we raised 2 kids together, and for the most part, things were going okay. But as the kids got older, got to middle school and high school, and I had also, started my business, around this time as well, back in well, yeah, and so I started a business and didn't get a lot of support from him at the beginning, and so, like I said, there were things that just kind of kept piling on, and I used to, daydream of, frankly, leaving him and moving in with my sister. And, even though that would necessitate moving to Arizona, and I lived in Florida, and I liked being closer to the ocean, so I wasn't sure I really wanted to live in the desert. And then in the end of 2016, my sister passed from cancer. So I didn't have that fantasy, that fantasy was over now. And it's like, okay, so what am I going to do? Am I going to continue making the best of it and stay in this marriage? Because I really did want to. Had been my intention, because everyone else in my family has gotten divorced. My parents got divorced eventually. My brother, well, he did get married, but then he wound up getting his marriage annulled. And then my sister got divorced. So not very good role models there. Now, frankly, my in-laws, they stayed married, until my mother-in-law passed. So they had a long marriage. In fact, they were married over 40 years, as I recall. Yeah, we went to a 40. Their daughter, my sister-in-law, had thrown them a 40th anniversary party. So I guess I did have, and then I did have some other good friends that were another good, wonderful couple, that actually were godparents for my kids. And, they were a good role model for me. But so, as I said, my intention was to stay married, but I started really just feeling like I was putting up with a lot. And part of what was going on in my life at this time was that I was doing some work on myself. So starting in 2009, I started my meditation practice. And spending a lot of time getting to know myself again, getting to know and to trust my feelings. And then around the time when my sister was diagnosed with cancer, and then after she passed, I started really doing a lot of personal development work. I was in a mastermind that offered different personal development courses. And so I was really growing as a person. But that other person in my marriage wasn't, and didn't really show any desire to want to do anything. And so that was really, and I know that this is sort of a trope, it's the age-old thing, one person is growing, and the other, we're drifting apart type of thing. Well, yeah, it happens. And it really was happening for me, because I was doing a lot of work on myself and learning about myself and starting to really get to know who I am at my core, and even just remembering frankly, who I was before I got involved in this relationship. And I didn't like some of the things that I was doing. I didn't really like who I had become in the marriage, because I was this person who was making a lot of compromises and not speaking up and just letting him make decisions. And I realized that, and I think I've even might have talked about this before on the podcast, but I realized that I was becoming like my dad, and that when my parents, how I remember their relationship growing up was that he was very quiet, and my mom was um, very much. In a way, more of the man in the family. She was a very masculine energy. She was um, very straightforward, could be very loud at times. Now, my dad could sometimes, but again, seemed to have more of a passive energy, let's say, not necessarily feminine, but very passive. And I think that's how he figured it was probably better to just kind of let her take the lead on stuff, and because he didn't want to pick a fight with her. And I realized that I had was doing the same type of thing, and I didn't like that because I am a strong personality. I think we all are. And and I just realized that I was hiding my light. I wasn't shining my light. So one of the things that I I started doing was I not only doing personal development work, but I was also working with different coaches and for at different times. And I remember as this was starting to come to a head, and it was probably around the time, maybe 2019 or so, that I was working with this one lovely coach. She unfortunately has since passed, but her name is Marty. And I said, how do you know when is the right time? Because I was like feeling like I might want to ask for divorce, but I was scared, and I wasn't sure how that was going to change my life. And I was also, again, had been this person who was very conflict avoidant because I had grown up in a home where there was a lot of family drama and yelling and stuff. So I didn't like that. And so again, that was part of what these habits of I became this people pleaser, um, and didn't want to make waves. But yeah, so she gave me a wonderful piece of advice, which I'm going to pass along to you on how do you know when it's time to change course. She says you'll know. There will come a time when you just will know. And she was right. And like I said, it happened for me in 2021. Now it took me a whole nother year to actually have the conversation with my husband because I wanted to get all my ducks in a row. And so I worked with a divorce coach because I wanted to make this an amicable divorce. I've heard so many horror stories of couples who, really get into these horrible uh, divorces where, they're just really yelling and it's very vindictive, and I'm working with attorneys, and just I didn't want that because I wasn't in an abusive, physically abusive relationship. He did have a temper sometimes, but he never, took it out on me physically, thank goodness, or I probably would have left a lot sooner. Somehow I would have found the way. I know, I feel in my core that I would have, but it was more of mm, psychological, and again, not as to the degree. Recently, I had Lori Jacobson on the program, and you may have seen that episode or heard that episode yet, but if not, look out for it. But she was in a really, I think, emotionally abusive relationship with her spouse before she decided to leave. So mine had some of that, but mostly he was, and I do I get along with him. I don't. I still know now that I don't want to ever live with him again. He's a good guy, but I don't want to live with him. But I knew that I wanted this to be as easy as possible. And that's why it took me a year to kind of get things in line before I actually asked him. But it was really interesting. It was that when this event happened and how he responded to it, and it was also thinking back of how he had responded to some other things too, that I realized it was like, that's it. Yeah, I can't do it anymore. And that's when I just started to look at how I could design my life my way. And what's led me to where I am today, living on my own, living in an apartment. We are still connected, and it's okay, because my leaving helped him to start taking more responsibility and doing things that I was doing for him a lot. And I think it's much better this way. And I'm proud of myself for finally honoring who I am and realizing that I deserve to be happy in a way that makes me happy. Right? And so you do too. You deserve to have a life that serves you. And if you are not having that right now, then it's time for you to start thinking about what will it take to change that. And the other point I want to make here is that all along the way, before I finally came to that pivot point, and where it was like, okay, yeah, this is it, I'm done, I was taking action. I was attending courses, or workshops. I was working with different coaches. I was spending a lot of time in inner work. I was meditating. I was journaling. And so doing that is what laid the foundation for me to finally come to the decision, because I was getting to know myself and I was really starting to pay attention and figure out, what do I want? What do I want from this life? What would make me happy? And it finally came to the point where it was like, okay, yeah, what I want is for things to change. I don't want to be in this relationship the same way anymore. And I will tell you, one of the shortly before I finally got up the courage to talk to him, I was at I went to a retreat. Again, retreats are wonderful to get away for a few days. And I went to this retreat in Florida, and with a wonderful group of women. And, I was talking about what was going on with my life and how I was really, not happy in my marriage, and seriously looking at, I think I'm going to be asking him for a divorce. I've been working on doing that, and I'm getting ready to do that. And so they asked me, why are you wearing a wedding ring then? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I took my wedding ring off that weekend and haven't worn it since, even before we separated. Now he still wears his, but to me, it really was that symbol of letting go. I talk about letting go and letting God as part of the love method. So yeah, I let that ring go. It's put away safely with my other jewelry, but I had to let that part of my life go. And I think that was also what started, again, giving me that courage to finally say, yeah, this is what I want for my life now. Now, I wanted to talk about also in business because I know a lot of you out there are entrepreneurs or maybe you're working maybe you're a professional and you are working for an organization and again in when we get to be definitely over 50, I think for sure, and we hit midlife that we do start asking these questions, is this all there is? Do I still want to, not only in my personal life, do the same things, but maybe in my professional life, I want to do something different. And and you start kind of thinking about what is it I want to do. And sometimes what happens to precipitate this is maybe it is uh, your kids finally moving out of the house and starting their own lives, and now you're an empty nester, and and even though you've been maybe happily employed, or maybe you haven't been employed, but maybe you've been a stay-at-home mom and you want to do something, or you have been working, whether you are working a 9 to 5 job or whether you've had your business and maybe that has served you for a long time, but now you're like, well, is this the time for me to make a change? How do I know when it's time? What can I do? And I think sometimes it could be having something happen in your life. So it could be perhaps maybe a relationship change prompts you to make the business change, or the professional change, because maybe it's not you who decided to end the marriage, maybe your spouse did. And so now you are taking a look at all areas of your life. So that could be something that happens. It could be that perhaps you lose a loved one. Maybe it is your spouse. Maybe now you have become a widow, or maybe it's a close family member. Like for me, when my sister passed, that was a big shock to me because she was the last person of my immediate family that I had grown up with, and even though I had been happily growing my SEO copywriting business, wasn't sure I wanted to keep doing that. And was really considering what did I want to do differently. So, or if I wanted to continue even doing it at all. And so for me, that journey in a way has been ongoing because it's been almost 10, no, yeah, it's been almost 10 years since my sister passed. It'll be 10 years in about 6 months or so, 8 months, 8 months. And it's really only been, I've been slowly pivoting out of doing the copywriting and into doing coaching, which was what I was really feeling drawn to do. But even more than that, though, I think when is it time to change course? Sometimes, how do you know, is when you get tapped on the shoulder by the universe. Because I'm thinking now, what is coming to mind is that what really changed my course and changed my direction will be 10 years this October, when I was meditating and I heard this voice in my head say, "You need to write a book about love." And I I opened my eyes, looked around my room and went, "Why would I write a book about love? What the heck do I know? What do I know about love? Why I'm a copywriter. Why would I write a book about love?" Well, as it turned out, that idea, that really was impetus for changing the course of my business, even though it took a while for that to formulate, because I didn't really seriously finish writing the book until 2020, even though I started it. But I had to go through the grieving process, losing my sister, and so I was working on it here and there. But I finally, yeah, I really did take. I think I might have started in. No, I started in 2019. Yeah, I started in 2019, seriously writing it, and then finished it in 2020. So, and I'm trying to think, how did I know when was the time for me to change course? Yeah, I think, oh, yes. Okay. So for me, for the business side of it, it was working with a coach and stepping out of my comfort zone. Because for me, even as I was writing this book, it's still I was still doing copywriting. I was still working with small business owners, helping them, doing content for their websites, helping them with emails, things like that. I was still doing that type of work, even though I was giving, like, presentations about LinkedIn. I think I was doing LinkedIn course, all types of marketing stuff. I was doing marketing stuff, even though I was being drawn to the coaching world and wanting to do more personal development, really work with people, with women in particular. And now, of course, I know for sure it's women in midlife, women over 50, like I am, to work with them. But how did I know when it was time? It was when I stepped out of my comfort zone and talked. I gave a presentation on the love method. That's what I write about in my book, where love is an acronym. And I had intended to do a presentation about LinkedIn for this women's group, but they never publicized the topic. And so, in working with my coach was encouraging me to talk about it because he felt it would help me to write the book if I started talking about it more. And he was right. It did help. So I asked the organizer if it was okay if I did this presentation and I talked about, the love method. And so she said yes. And so I did. And it was positively received. That's what I'll say. It was positively received by the women there. And that gave me the confidence to keep going, to really dive into what was the love method and to start writing the book, and then to start even doing. I know after that I started doing Facebook lives where I was reading the daily word from Unity every day. I did this for like over a month, where I would go live every single day. And the first day, again, I was nervous about doing it because people were used to hearing me talk about marketing, online marketing, not to talk about spirituality and God and all of this. And so I was nervous, but I liked doing it. It lit me up inside to share the daily word. And eventually, I started channeling light language too, which eventually I also started sharing. So, how do you know when it's time to change course? Sometimes it's getting that signal, getting some kind of whether it is like a divine download, which is what I called my idea to write a book about love, or it is working with people and doing the work on yourself so that you start to know what you want. because the only way to do that is to get to know yourself. And then I recommend doing that. All the things I've talked about today is going to workshops, go to retreats, work with coaches, work with counselors, do the inner work, like practicing mindfulness or meditation, journal, do breath work, whatever you find that you can do to help yourself start to know who you are, because that is the only way that you are then going to be able to design your life your way. You got to learn who you are, what you believe, what do you value, and then you can start putting that into action. And I want to read this to you. This was some work that I did last year when I was working with my branding coach, Tiffany Newman, was coming up with, what are my values? And I actually, my website has been redesigned now, thanks to my wonderful daughter, Allie Rand. And we put these values on the website, but they're slightly written a little bit different than how I have them. But this was my initial way of putting them together. And these are my values. And maybe they'll inspire you by sharing them today to come up with your own values and figure out what's important to you, because that will help you in then changing course. It'll give you help to give you the direction of not only knowing once you know when it's time to change course, this will help you know that you're moving in the right direction. So for me, my values are authenticity, and it comes from being true to yourself always and in all ways. Acceptance of your divine nature leads to freedom. Joy is your birthright. Live it. Love is what you're made of. Embrace it. Be of service to others however and whenever you can. Spirituality, it's the thread that connects us to one another and our higher power. And community is how we thrive. And I have them, I was reading them because I have them saved on a little piece of paper, and I like keeping them on my desktop as a reminder to me of what's really important. And yeah, so I think I've covered the main points. Yeah, of how to know when it's time to change course, because I think mostly it's about keep moving, keep moving, keep growing, and also then, start formulating a picture of what you want. Because once you do get clear on what you want, then as you are doing this work, eventually there will come a time, maybe someone will come into your life, you'll get some sort of a sign that, like, okay, yeah, now is the time. It's time to move forward. I've done the prep work, but now it's time to just really dive in and change course and make that change, and whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, you can do it. So what I want to share with you right now, before we end today's show, is something I mentioned briefly, something that I also started to do, which has also been a tool that I have used to help me in releasing what doesn't serve me and helping me to gain more clarity about taking different actions in my life. And so what I want to share with you right now is something that I call light language. and it is a form of communication that I speak and I sing, sometimes both, not at the same time. That would be a good trick, but but I do, depending. Sometimes it's only spoken, sometimes it's only sung, or sometimes I go back and forth. But what it is it's something that it's a language that may sound familiar to you, but you can't quite place it, and that's okay because it's really a language that is meant for your heart. It's almost it's a type of sound healing, really, because it's everything that we speak is a vibration and it's a frequency. And when I am sharing this, it really is a love frequency. And so it's a very, I feel a very healing, uh, spiritually healing. It could be even be physically healing, but definitely emotionally and spiritually healing type of message. So, what I will invite you to do today is if you're listening to this while you're driving your car, to pause and come back to this later when you can be uh, sitting somewhere comfortably, um, ideally even to just close your eyes and just allow whatever comes through to wash over you, and set an intention that whatever you do here today, maybe it will be, maybe you are looking at trying to know when it's time to change course, and ask for guidance, ask for a sign that that will allow you to know it's time. So set that intention, but regardless, whatever, that the message you hear is going to be for your soul's highest good and the highest good of all. So that's the intention I am setting, that what I share will be for your soul's highest good. So just relax, breathe, close your eyes if you like. I'm going to close my eyes because I like to close my eyes when I do this too. Okay. Anaya koekae anekayana kuane usako koina kaishana kuema kaya tokia shinga pataliete tanno creto puma koya tekiana kara tieno koishi kunna karepe shonna koya banda karatate xiano kai kayo tu ona kaya he sokoyane shonna koya bato koya moshakata ala kiinkia no tokia bata asa kashiano koya puinka de ria ama konuyo no kupa nano kupa kaya sonae kuya na kaya e shanna koya ponna kaya tata ala kaya na kinka shaki ano kuya pa kwaniana kuka mana kashakaya to kangage ala kaya no kaka Sonno kia toka ma, siano kia pushaka ya pushaka bomaria te kiana, alaka shana kuyaba, koyana ki, koyana. Mm. Mm. Hope you enjoyed that today. And I would like to encourage you, or invite, maybe not encourage, let's say invite you to get, if you'd like to know more about, yeah, if you'd like to know more about light language, maybe you'd like to work with me, and actually get a private session with me. I do an intro, an introductory session, that you can schedule. It's like a 15-minute one, so it'll be a little bit longer than what I just shared with you now, and we'll be able to work on something that is unique to you, what you're particularly going through. So I will have the link to that in the show notes today. So and of course, if you're watching this, you'll see the link right on the screen, so you can go there and schedule a complimentary 15-minute session with me, and then see if you like it, because I do also offer longer sessions that you can purchase as well. So yeah, I'm so glad to be with you. I love talking about how to make midlife your best time of your life. And because I was talking with someone the other day, I was saying that, every decade I've been in now has been better than the one before. My 40s were good. Even though I had some losses during that time, but then my 50s were good. Again, even though I had some losses in those times, but overall, it was still good because I was growing and I was learning. And now my 60s, also, and a phenomenal time. And I am looking forward to, well, first getting through the rest of this decade, but we'll see what the 70s hold for me, because I'll probably still be here doing maybe doing this podcast, or maybe doing something else. Who knows? Oh my gosh. Yeah, who knows? Who knows where we'll be? But for now, I want to thank you for being here today. And I hope that you've learned something to help you to live life boldly and on purpose.